Morena koutou, no mai haere mai ki tēnei hui. Morning everyone, and welcome to the Community and District Development Committee for Wednesday the 11th of September. So welcome Laura and members of the public. We also have people on live stream, and Morena Councillor Kiriopa, who is there on Zoom. Just a reminder, can we turn our mobile phones off and put them away? We hopefully will be able to conclude this meeting reasonably early this morning, since we have a reasonably short agenda. Councillor Patterson, if you'd like to open the meeting with a kariki, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roto, tūtaua mai I waho, kia tau, ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Kia ora, Councillor Patterson. Apologies, I haven't received any. So moving on now, are there any declarations of interest for this morning's meeting? No, there don't appear to be any. I'd like to then move on to a presentation from the BMX World Cup. So I'd like to welcome Amy McGregor, who is a very familiar face to us all. We have Sam Hanna, the new chair for the BMX Club, and Caitlin McMurphy, who does the funding. And so the purpose of this presentation is to report back from the event. Council provided $100,000 worth of funding for the event. So Amy, we're in your hands, and over to you and Sam.
Excellent. Kia ora koutou, and thank you very much for having us. It's a wonderful topic. I love talking about this. It was a great event. So yeah, thank you again for having us, and thank you again up front for your support, because without Council we wouldn't have been able to make it happen. All the way back to the beginnings of leasing the horse paddock to the BMX Club and being involved in the actual build of the facility, supporting the various events that got us to this to the World Cup level. So we went through a regional champs to a national champs to an Oceania continental championships to the World Cup. So we stepped through, and Council was there the whole way in one way or another, supporting us. So thank you for that. Council was definitely a big player, but there were also many other players at the table. Local businesses like Red Stag have been there the whole way. Other trusts like One Foundation, the Rotorua Trust, the Thermal Explorer Fund, New Zealand Major Events, and of course, from a sport perspective, it was the club, Rotorua BMX New Zealand, Cycling New Zealand, and UCI were the kind of key players there. So it takes a village to put something like this on, and again, even with our local community in terms of volunteers and so on. So it was definitely a big team effort. We set ourselves some objectives up front to be clear that we understood what success would look like. So I've got a few slides coming now with some photos and a few talking points in terms of how did we do, but I guess overall, when we step back in terms of did we showcase a world-class venue? Absolutely. Did we showcase Rotorua and New Zealand as a major event host and with clear capability in that space? Absolutely. Did we showcase BMX as an accessible and aspirational sport to our young people? Yes. Increasing capability within the sport nationwide? Yes, again. Providing a pathway to Paris, to 2024 Olympics and beyond in terms of our athlete outcomes. Visibility and reputation with UCI, laying some groundwork to potentially open doors for future events for our community and for New Zealand. It was an important part of it from a national major events fund perspective as well, and increasing relationships across the cycling community. If we just go through, and Council also had some key outcomes in terms of the funding that you provided, which was around attracting visitors to the city, which is a part of the economic drive as well. Community engagement, which Sam will talk a bit about the Leverage and Legacy program that she ran shortly, which was in terms of engaging with a lot of the schools. The quality and the safety of the event. Obviously, Council wants to be associated with something which is safe and successful, and we were. Engagement with Council and biculturalism representing, it's reflecting Rotorua's bicultural nature. So showcasing the world-class venue, everyone was raving about the venue. So I spoke to a photographer, the UCI photographer, who's been following World Cups for the last 14 years, and he said, hands down, this is the most beautiful venue in the world to photograph. And so I think comments like that came sort of thick and fast throughout the weekend. The teams loved it in terms of from a track point of view, from a facilities point of view. Spectators, it was really easy how we had access over the bridge. Two separate access points to the venue, the size and scale of it as well. So overall, certainly from a UCI perspective, a teams, a competitors and a spectators perspective, that the venue delivered. Showcasing as a major event host, well, I guess this is a World Cup. It doesn't get much bigger than this, unless we were going to go for the Olympics, for example. And so we had all of the top international athletes here in Rotorua, I guess, racing for the World Cup. So the gentleman on the middle there with the blue top, that's Joris Dorday. He went on to win the gold medal at the Olympics in Paris. It was actually a French trifecta at the Olympics, 1, 2 and 3, it was amazing. And then the lady who won here in Rotorua, Saya Sakakibara, on the right in the middle, she also went on to win in the Paris Olympics. So we had the Olympians here demonstrating the top of the sport, which was amazing, and we had lots of internationals. Colombia has a huge following of BMX, so we had a lot of Colombians in the crowd and so on, so definitely world class.
We managed to get 28 countries come over to represent themselves, which was awesome. That was the goal.
Yeah. And then showcasing BMX as an accessible and aspirational sport. So Sam will talk a bit about the Leverage and Legacy program.
So I ran the Leverage and Legacy program, which we had a few key objectives we wanted to do. 1, introduce kids to the sport. 2, get our coaches up to speed. There's a lack of coaching throughout New Zealand, so we ran some coaching courses, which we had 40 people from New Zealand attend, which was awesome because we haven't had it in BMX for a while. We also needed our commissaires to be up to speed. So commissaires, we have one international one who represents UCI, but we wanted to do a few more, and they went on to Oceanias in Brisbane and commissaired that event. So they've dipped their foot in an international pool too. We also wanted to represent Rotorua as a city, which was awesome. We had athletes going up the luge, photographing themselves all around Hamarana, Nongataha. There was pictures popping up all around Rotorua, which was awesome. A lot of the athletes, coaches and that were really happy with the mountain biking. They said they want to come back a week earlier just to go mountain biking, and then we'll do the serious BMX stuff. So from that perspective, it showcased the city really well, which was awesome. With the skills event, so we had over 300 kids come to our practice day on the Friday. We put buses on with the help of Red Stag and provide sausage sizzles and drink bottles for everyone. We had Sarah Walker, who most of you probably know was an Olympic BMXer, and Jessie Smith, who was an ex-BMXer that also travelled the world. They headed up and brought all the kids in and took them around the venue. We watched the athletes and just had a really good time. Sarah got swamped for autographs. We had like Megan Williams, who's a Rotorua representative, came and did a talk to them. It was a really fun event, and the kids were really happy about it. We had a massive increase to our Start Up to Race program after this. A little bit too much, but it's not a bad problem. So that was awesome. We also had Megan and a few other representatives like Rico Bierman, who went on to represent the Olympics, did some talking in Auckland around skills for BMX. We had Rico D'Ambers travel to Taupo. We had Megan come into schools around Rotorua and do a talk. So it wasn't just Rotorua, we tried to get it out to the wider community and New Zealand.
And so this is probably a bit further to what Sam said there in terms of commissaires and so on. So increasing capability within the sport. So a couple of pictures there. The top one is our track crew. So having to lift their game to be getting a track ready for a World Cup event, which is the pinnacle in terms of your quality of your track and the scrutiny that you go under. So we now have our track as accredited in terms of being a World Cup suitable track, which you actually have to pay quite a hefty fee and get assessed and so on to get that status. Commissaire training, volunteers in terms of multiple different roles and leadership roles within the volunteers for the 2 days. We had Sarah Walker on our governance committee, and even things like, our commentators. So we've got a local commentator there with the UCI commentator who travels to all the races all around the world, and I guess is, at that international level of his craft, and then working with locals. As Sam mentioned, Rico Bierman on the right, he went on, had a sensational year and actually went to the Olympics. So he's really young. I think is he 21?
21.
This is early on in his journey. We also had Layla Walker qualify for the Olympics. I didn't have a picture of her. She's, I think, even younger, 19 or 20. So some of our young New Zealand athletes, it definitely has helped them in terms of their journey. And then we've got the really, really young ones. So the top photo there is part of some of the New Zealand team going, it's their first ever kind of world event, and they're just starting their journey in terms of where they want to go as athletes. And the bottom picture is the two Grenoff brothers who actually were first and second in, I think, on the Saturday, and again were in the final. And one of them came first on the Sunday as well. So they went on to have a really good World Cup season. So definitely lots of feedback from our big numbers of New Zealand competitors, and just, amazed to be able to do that at home. So really helpful for that. Building visibility and reputation with UCI. So we've got Mayor Tanya Tapsell on the left there after opening the event, talking to Norm McCann.
Last night we received a letter from Norm McCann, who is talking to Tanya. He is the UCI president, I guess, of the BMX racing around the world, and he just sent us a letter of recommendation. But I just want to read a couple of sentences that embrace Rotorua New Zealand. The New Zealand public embraced this event, targeting ticket numbers exceeding both days, while at the same time the Rotorua city and surrounds showcasted through the broadcasting feed. Rotorua as a city was an excellent destination. UCI personnel and athletes were warmly welcoming by the community. It's a wonderful city, well set up for accommodating large events. Overall, our experience during the 2024 UCI BMX World Cup in Rotorua was fantastic. We would welcome a bid by Cycle NZ for the UCI BMX World Cup to return to Rotorua for future events.
So we had that feedback from athletes, teams and UCI in terms of when can we come back, and they were sort of almost like, can we come back next year? And we were all like, oh my gosh, no way, like in terms of just in the amount of energy and effort and like, funding and so on that it does consume. But it would be amazing to do on, a 4-yearly cycle, for example, in line with the Olympics, because you do then it's a good driver for the athletes to make the extra effort to come down to New Zealand, because they're used to competing mostly in the Northern Hemisphere. So the way we timed it was to make sure it was a lead-in to the Olympics when they were all really keen to be getting points to qualify. So, so I guess in terms of, in UCI's eyes, Rotorua is an amazing venue, and they would love to come back if we would have them. So that's pretty great feedback, I would say, for our town and the event in terms of how we put that on. The last one was around relationships across the cycling community, and relationships between BMX, Cycling New Zealand, UCI, we've sort of covered off, but the other one that we really put some attention into was working with our mana whenua groups, with Tuharangi and Ngāti Whakaui, and it's a bit hard to read there, but we did want to acknowledge Clark Pereka from RLC in terms of his role in connecting everybody and leading us through that. So we had a wonderful pohuri for all of the athletes on, I think, the Thursday before the event. We had quite a long period of planning up through that, and then engagement throughout the weekend, and then working with the various schools to make sure that we had good participation in terms of our Whakaui schools, Tuharangi and so on as well. So that was really good. We had a debrief afterwards, and it was really positive in terms of the connection, I think, between the sport and our Tuharangi and Whakaui leaders. Sam, do you want to cover off? Mostly we've covered off a lot of this, but...
Yeah, so like I said, we ran quite a few things. So the coaches workshops, we had over 300 riders, over 300 students attend our practice day to visit the riders. Our venue certification got signed off, which is valid for 4 years, so it will align with the next time we want to apply for the World Cup. sector capability, officers training, promoting Rotorua in New Zealand and biocultural interactives. Just on what Amy said, the feedback we got was a lot of athletes go to different countries like Argentina or Netherlands, and that they've never been so welcomed. They've never experienced anything like this before, and they all loved it. There was a lot of talk about what it actually was going to be. They had no idea, and they really embraced it, and we're so happy to have seen the New Zealand culture put on show.
They particularly loved the waiata from the local schools in terms of that was a big highlight, I think, for a lot of them as well, right? So, that was a really good point, that they don't usually get a welcoming sort of ceremony and so on, and such a, something so different for them as well. All the numbers are quite hard to read here. Essentially, the key message from this is that really high level of satisfaction from people that attended the event. So overall, a 4.8 out of 5 average in terms of level of satisfaction for those that visited. So people that attended really, really were satisfied. It was perceived to be good value for money. Our ticketing, we made sure, was very accessible in terms of particularly wanting to get a lot of young people to the event, and overall a high net promoter score of 87. In terms of outcomes, I guess we had so many people involved in different roles and developing themselves from a capability point of view and making connections and networking and so on, which was awesome. In terms of overall attendees, we had 3,000 attendees. Visitor nights, 6,500. And spend by international visitors 1.3 million, and overall gross benefit of 3 million. We spent, in terms of the event, around 900,000. So sounds like a big number, and it's big compared to our smaller events, but compared to some of the international sporting events that get put on, it's actually not a huge number. But we had to work very hard for every dollar in terms of making that work, and managing every dollar in terms of the budget was set 2 years prior to the event, and so it was really carefully managed to make sure that we didn't exceed that in terms of running the event financially, sustainably. We've talked about this again, 28 countries represented. We basically took Rotorua to the world, and from a social media broadcast point of view, overall audience of 8.1 million people, with an advertising space rate worth $3.2 million in terms of coverage that Rotorua and the World Cup received, and really an international, showcase. Thank you, Sam. And that carried on throughout the year as other World Cups, because Rotorua kept getting raised again in various videos and commentary and so on, and at other World Cups. So that was excellent. That's it.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. And Sam, are you happy to take any questions, or if there are any, councillors? That was a very comprehensive report. And the other thing is, councillors, the written report has been sent out to you all, and will be dropped into Stella later, which has a bit more information than Amy and Sam have just presented. So are there any questions? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report, ladies. Awesome. Just going back to the slide on the dollars and cents. Not that one, the one before? Yeah, that one. So spend by international visitors 1.3 million. Am I reading that right? Yep. And international visitors either 391 or 387. Which one would you say it would be?
They're close. They're very close. They're 4 people different. So I'm not sure which of where the 4 people sit there, but roughly 400 people. I would. Yeah,
that's pretty high per person spend. That's about nearly 3,300 per individual over how long? A week? That's a great investment.
Well, it was a lot of team spend, right? So they were here for longer than a week too. So they were, but that is, Yeah,
that's a very good return. And just getting back to the community impact, we're trying to find ways to get kids engaged, particularly our rangatahi, and stop them causing issues out in the community, get them involved in doing sports. Do you have any programs along the lines of where getting some kids who can barely afford shoes to get access to a bike?
So we work with Aaron Says, who is part of the schools program, which is run through the Lakes Council. He brings out low decile schools and communities, like the likes of Kaingaroa and Murupara as well. He has free access to our club anytime. He just has to let us know when we're doing it, and he takes them out, and we've got helmets, we've got gloves, so they just really show up as long as they've got long pants and a long top. Yeah, Aaron will take them around and let them do and teach them new things.
Fantastic, thank you.
There's also a sponsorship for kids that are keen to take it on. One of the challenges, though, is then actually having, in terms of taking it on as a regular sport, I think, is actually having somebody to bring them down to the track on a regular basis and so on. But we've been trying to find ways to, I guess, financially make it easier in terms of cover fees, cover bikes and things like that, in terms of for those that show a real shine to the sport. So I think, yeah, Aaron does both, sort of trying to give everybody a chance to have a go, and then also those that just are really excited, how do we actually make it possible for them to take it up, I guess.
Yeah, and like we say, the biggest barrier is actually getting the transport to the track and having someone willing to take them.
Ka pai.
Okay. Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. And look, thank you very much. I want to first of all acknowledge the Rotorua BMX Club for their strong aspirations to get a world-class venue, which created this opportunity, of course. The question I have is around coverage. So 8.1 million is a lot of people. Are you aware what sort of areas of the world that may have been from? Because obviously the economic benefit not only for the spend locally but also for attracting our international visitors back to New Zealand is really important for us. So I'm just wondering if there were some sort of key regions such as Europe or America or Colombia that this was being broadcast to. There we go.
Here we go.
So this is in terms of the actual broadcast viewers, and then the audience, I think, is the ongoing up, includes things like, your Instagram, your Facebook and so on, and snippets throughout. But in terms of the actual viewers, in terms of the full coverage, you've got USA, Australia, France, Colombia, Brazil and New Zealand as kind of the biggest areas, and I would imagine that would extrapolate with similar numbers in terms of that overall global reach. Europe is huge in terms of BMX, so that would be, you've got France pulling up in there, but Netherlands is another really big, and the UK as well in terms of BMX watches, and they had their athletes out for the event, and so yeah, great coverage for Rotorua.
On that note also, BMX New Zealand, they never show the pre-rounds to it, so you have a rounding system and then you go into 1/8, 1/4, semis, etc. We got it approved by UCI, and it's never happened before, that we could broadcast the rounds. That was done through YouTube, and then UCI took on the rights for the 1/8 and that so forth. So the beforehand rounds, which are never broadcasted normally, got done through the BMX New Zealand channel.
Sam's just reminded me of one other point, which, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind making, is that traditionally, for all of the BMX World Cups that have happened in the past, the men's final was last, because it's the kind of biggest, I guess, event. And for our event, one of the things that we requested was actually, could we have the women's final last on one of the days and the men's final last on one of the days? And so that happened for us here in Rotorua, and then they took that in terms of as a concept out to the other World Cups. So we thought it was great to be doing something to influencing on the global scale in terms of some of that difference of thinking.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you for an extensive report. This is brilliant. There's a lot of information in there, and congratulations on what sounds like a really successful event. So that's obviously a better outcome than Crankworks were able to achieve earlier this year, so congratulations. Excuse my ignorance, I didn't get to go out and see this event live, unfortunately. Where would I find the track? It's, where in Waipa?
So if you're heading out to the Waipa, where you go mountain biking, right?
Yep.
So you're heading out towards Taupo. So when you hang a left and you're heading towards the secret spot, the very first left is a bridge with some colourful blue poles. If you go over that bridge, that's where the BMX track is in there. So when you're heading...
It's all signposted?
Oh, yep,
Cool.
yep. And you can't miss it if you're heading in that direction. It's
So
still
the
got a
track-
lot of the UCI branding and so on all over it. Yep.
Great. So is the track being well used on the weekends or whatever?
Yep, so we, term 4 and term 1, we run our programs. So Monday night we do an adults night, Tuesday night we do an intermediate training. Every second Wednesday we've got a club night. Thursday we've got our Start Up to Race program, which is extremely popular. That's massive increase in numbers for that. That's really just a fun night for kids, getting them on bikes, getting them active, that type of thing. We also have the dirt jumps there. So Grant Butterworth is a committee member and he's set up a dirt jump jam, I don't know what you want to call it, log yard it's called, but that's open to public too. So it's free access for anyone who wants to get through it. We don't have doors closed, so anyone can jump on it at any time. With the 8-metre ramp too, we also have the elite training come over, so that's mainly based out of Cambridge, so they'll come over and use the track quite a lot. And then obviously we host race meets on the weekends.
Right, okay. So the track is suitable for beginners or you have a...
Yep, definitely. I mean, we're not going to send you off the big ramp on your first night. But no, anyone can come and give it a go. There's different levels, so there's different straights which provide different skill sets. Yeah. But, I mean, there's Caitlin's kids. How old are your kids, Caitlin? So one's on a runner bike and he's just going on it, and then we've got one on a pedal bike. So it's from really 4 upwards. And then we've got Amy McGregor, who's just joined the council. I don't know if anyone knows who she is. Oh, sorry, Amy Duckett. And, there she is. Yeah, she's our thank you. And, I mean, she's started out as a mum just wanting to do something, and now she's getting rankings throughout New Zealand after 2 years of just coming down and riding the track. So you don't have to be a superstar to start, just come and give it a go.
Cool, thank you very much. Awesome.
It sounds like a challenge, Councillor Lee.
Should we host a council meeting out there one day?
Councillor Patterson, did you have another question?
Thank you for your indulgence. Yes, I noted you commented that every 4 years would be about your limit to run a World Cup. But is there such a thing as an Oceania Champs at all? Have we got a chance of putting a hand up for that?
We did host Oceanias in 2023, so that was part of our sort of progression in terms of building to the World Cup. So Oceanias happens every 2 years, every year, but New Zealand hosts every second year, and so we were the last host in New Zealand. So if we were to put our hand up for that again, it would be in a couple of years' time, because the MXNZ allocates quite far in advance. But yeah, that's definitely well within our capability, that in a nationals event, and I don't know from a club perspective if you've got any other applications lined up at the moment.
No, we looked into it Norths, but it's always going to be Labour weekend, and that aligns with Waka. And from a perspective of car parks and them being such a large event, it was not going to come to a point. But Oceania is definitely achievable. Last year we had 60 riders from Australia come out to Oceanias and one from Tahiti. So no, it was definitely good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Waru.
Kia ora tātou, o tira e te tiamana. Apologies for my lateness here. I was just waiting for my daughter to finish up at the appointment. Hoeno. Tēnā kōrua. Kia ora, Amy. Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. My question, obviously, and there was the tūhaurangi Ngāti Whakaue, Ngā Hapu e Toru. How important was that relationship in order to get this off the ground and running and being successful as it was?
I think it was really important in terms of the outcomes around how successful it was perceived as a welcoming, warm and different and authentic destination. It was important, I guess, for us to represent Rotorua genuinely as well. Like it was something, and we couldn't do that alone, obviously, so having that partnership and that engagement and the willingness to spend time to do that with us and get it right was hugely important. And it was a factor in our applications as well, that we would be doing that and that we would be, I guess, presenting New Zealand and Rotorua the way that we should. So, yeah, it was very important.
Nice. Can
I just say on that also, it's not just the UCI World Cup. They came along to Oceanias as well, opened our ceremony. So we do use them every time we host a major event.
would you say it's set the bar, I suppose, for others to try and hit?
I'd love to have Clark here actually, because the feedback was really from the iwi side as well was really complimentary in terms of the engagement, and so I think there was a lot of commentary around we should replicate this process and this approach for our other big events in terms of long lead-in and engagement and very, I guess, working together in terms of what it would look like and how to achieve it. The other thing, just before you close, and I'm probably a bit remiss in terms of having not said it earlier, is that so Sam and I are here representing the club, but because it was a large event, we did have a paid event manager who went above and beyond, Jeanette Douglas from Events Collective, and she couldn't be here today, but she was a huge driver behind it, so I just wanted to acknowledge her really great mahi in this space, because she took it with a huge passion in terms of getting and managing our budget as well. So that was, just want to acknowledge her for that.
Thank you, Amy. Sam, I just, the question really comes from, when you've got an Uncle Slim and a cousin Tuhotoariki and with the pene whānau, well, everyone gets behind it, and it's a great thing. So congratulations, and I hope it keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much to Sam, Caitlin and Amy for coming in, and congratulations on a very well run event, and it's great to see all the metrics being ticked off there. So I know that you have a little presentation. I wondered if you maybe wanted to come down here to the front so that we could capture it on live stream, and I'll ask Her Worship the Mayor to come up here as well, and maybe, I don't know if we want to grab some photos while you're here just briefly to just acknowledge this presentation.
I'll just tell you what it is while Sam hands it over. So Sam is handing over to Tanya. This is one of the winners' jerseys for the World Cup, and we got it signed by the winners of each round. So the Saturday round, round 1, and the Sunday round, round 2. So there's the women elite, men's elite, women under 23 and men's under 23 signatures on the a replica race winning jersey from the weekends, for Council to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy, Sam and Caitlin once again, and we'll find somewhere to hang that.
Another Amy, but she's also fabulous. She's in the sport, also, that sounds terrible, she is fabulous. She's in the sport and rec team, and Rob's team, Amy Duckett. So she's taken on one of the community engagement roles, I think.
Okay.
Keep an eye out for her. She's very excited to be part of your team.
Thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. We will now carry on with the Community and District Development Committee. I'll just give you a minute to get to your agendas. So returning now to the agenda, so are there any urgent items? And when I mean urgent items, I mean items that need immediate attention or action, and matters that have not already been raised with the CE. If they're not urgent like that, then they're minor matters, and I'll take those at the end of the meeting. So with that definition for urgent items, are there any urgent items? Councillor Patterson.
Just signalling I'd have a minor matter that I would like to address later.
We'll deal with that at the end. Thank you very much. So we'll move now to confirmation of the minutes. Page 6 of your agenda. There were 2 action points that have been covered off. Apart from that, are there any other matters for amendment or correction? Thank you. So I have a mover that the minutes of the Community and District Development Committee meeting held on the 14th of August 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record. It's moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Lee. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. Now going to move on to our District Plan Policy Programme. So that's page 15 of the agenda. Can I ask for a mover and a seconder to receive the report for the District Plan Policy Programme? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, thank you, that is carried. And welcome, JP. Nice to have you sitting here beside me. So you're going to do the presentation from here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll briefly go through this presentation. Obviously, the intention was just to provide some key points that are detailed in the report. I think what was important about the report was clearly showing to you we've done a lot of work around the future development strategy and responded to the requirements of the Housing and Business Assessment, the HBA. But obviously running in parallel to that is we've got a new government who has a very clear agenda of change, which is summed up as the Going for Housing Growth agenda. So there's a number of proposed changes through the RMA and also to things like the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. So what we've tried to do is to say, look, we've put a lot of work and a lot of thought into the longer term view of where we're going around the future development strategy in response to growth. But in parallel to that, obviously there's this change agenda coming through. So we're just trying to make sure we're really clear in this report about the plan changes we need to focus on over the next 3 years, but also be really cognizant of the fact that we may need to input into the government agenda, so submissions, but also be required to make some changes to our approach potentially mid next year. So that's probably the time frame for that. So it was really a case of trying to make sure we captured that information for you in a report, just so you get an overall picture of how these things fit together. Really what I wanted to just touch on there was things like the historic population changes, because really part of that goes into the Housing and Business Assessment. So we're having to do our update for that, which is the 2024 version of our HBA. We've also got a lens on some of those key policy changes that are coming out of government. So we're making sure we're prepared as we undertake our current work and potentially anticipating some of the changes which are likely to come through. Talking about housing efficiency, some of our FDS context, and then that Going for Housing Growth, GFHG summary there, of what are those key changes, and for us really the next steps of what are those plan changes we need to focus on as prioritised out of the future development strategy. Hard to see here, but obviously our HBA, our Housing and Business Assessment, talks to some population projections and they're termed in low, medium and high, so we have medium growth scenarios, and really that's important for us because as a medium growth council, again the terminology fits, we need to start anticipating our housing capacity requirements based on those population growth scenarios. One of the things that we thought was really important when we got Infometrics to do some of our population projections was also to look backwards in the historic trends. So this is a graph that just shows some of those historic trends, but interesting enough, there's not been a consistent methodology applied across the different decades. So we got right back to 1935 on the graph there, but you can see there some of the different census results through to things like Stats New Zealand annual, the 5-yearly census, and also the annual New Zealand stats, which is the sub-national population estimates. So that's another thing that Stats New Zealand does on an annual basis. All of them deliver slightly different results. So, and that's the problem without physically being in a position to count every single person in our district at any point in time, is there is a lot of estimation that goes into it. Even something like a census has a margin of error for those people who aren't filling them in correctly. The key there is that's our population trend. When you take a long run view, so in amongst all of that is different cycles, GFCs, periods when other cities take off, changes in migration, a whole bunch of issues that come through, but that's the overall projection, which for us comes in those sort of ranges. So compounding growth, you can see there 76 to 2018, 0.7 compounding growth. The 27 years from 96 to 2023, and then a different time period there. So that's where we feel that we are correct in, at this stage, using something like the Infometrics 0.6 number, which seems consistent with our historic trends. So that's just a bit of a reassurance that some of the growth numbers that have been applied are logical in how we think we need to make sure we've got that capacity requirement coming through. One of the changes that the government is proposing is to actually use high growth scenarios and make sure the capacity is there for high growth. So that's one of the changes we'll have to anticipate as we start doing the next housing and business assessment. So as you're aware, our 2021 Housing and Business Assessment gave us some key numbers that we needed something like 9,700 odd homes across the next 30 years based on that 0.6 cumulatively. We've done a number of changes since 2021. Obviously, as part of that national policy statement, we've also produced our future development strategy saying where should that capacity go or that growth requirement go, and then also made a number of changes to our rules in our district plan through Plan Change 9. So that allowed greater height, further intensification. It transported the MDS from being outside of the district plan into our current rule framework within the plan. And so the estimate that we have, and this is an internal estimate, is that gave us a capacity of 12,400, so more than the 30-year requirement of 9,700. So that's a really important thing for us to test against the required HBA methodology in the 2024 update. Is that sufficient? Now, again, that's based on a medium growth. If we go to a high growth scenario, we also need to start quantifying what that change may be. So that's not quite so good when you see that up on screen, but that's sort of the elements that are required through the housing and business assessment of plan enabled, and then there's some rules around getting right down to reasonably expected to be realised. So there's some methodology there that the consultants do, that they produce these reports for us to make sure we create a picture of what are our housing bottom lines and what capacity do we need to enable. Just a bit of a refresher, you remember the future development strategy starts saying, okay, within our urban area, where do we need to start thinking across those 30 years to build that kind of capacity? And so this is where you start going, where might we need to move from being a medium growth to a high growth to enable greater capacity? Where do we consider providing additional greenfield areas for future housing development as well, outside of normal infill and general development. So that was the 30-year picture, and that's really important to understand also how we considered those to be phased over that 30 years to make sure we produced enough capacity and supply options for the market to respond. So the colours there just also indicate some of that phasing. So again, even things like Nongataha, where we see their potential new greenfield, that would be expanded as plan changes over the next 30 years. So sort of 10-year horizons. So that's the gradual increase in capacity to make sure that that's available for the market. That's probably one of the most significant changes being discussed within the Going for Housing Growth is to make all of that capacity available early. So there's options almost immediately. So that's quite a significant one for us, and one when you look at that map, that's the zoning enablement that might have to be done all at once as a consequence of that Going for Housing Growth agenda. So for us as a council, really important as a conversation around then, how do we start planning for that infrastructure? How do we manage that rollout? And how do we manage the community conversation? Because those are quite big changes for a number of communities. So just in real quickly, there's the key policy threads that are detailed in the report. Councillors, I won't dive into those in any huge detail, but it is something that we are tracking. I made the comment about the current scenarios within our housing and business assessment. So you can see there that I talked about the growth projections were based on a low, medium and high. The highest gap there, if you look at my little picture in the corner there, potentially we need to start saying we've got to have capacity for potentially 25 to 30% more if we were just to look at our current HPA and say, hey, we need to make sure we've got zoning capacity for those extra homes. So that's quite significant, and for us in either reviewing our HPA or certainly looking into our next update of the future development strategy, or in subsequent plan changes, that means we need to find some more land or some more density to accommodate that potential capacity. So a really important conversation for a next council as we start seeing that legislation land. Because again, as a community and as a district, we have a lot of constraints on where housing can go, and potentially in greenfield significantly. So a really important future consideration for council. The other piece here, and I just highlight this, was making sure, and this is, Minister Bishop has been quite clear in saying this, is, and the indications are making sure we get intensification enabled where it is the most accessible. So on the left of this slide, you can see an accessibility model that was created for us as we started to prepare the future development strategy, which really talks to a bunch of accessibility criteria, which really highlights the inner suburbs of the city have the most access to the most things, whether that's shopping, schools, medical facilities, public transport, large reserve areas. All of those things say those are kind of the areas from an urban design perspective where you should be considering intensification. So just a really important consideration as we go into thinking about planning moving forward. Mixed-use developments, again, we have a number of centres, a hierarchy of centres across our city, getting down to suburban shopping centres and the areas where there's a corner dairy, a hairdresser and an off-licence. Talked about that yesterday. Again, one of the things that is coming through in this view is also to make sure we're enabling the opportunity that as intensification occurs, those kind of ancillary commercial activities can happen anywhere. So you end up with our residential suburbs being more seen as open to not just putting sort of businesses into those suburban centres. So quite a challenging change for us and for New Zealand really as an approach moving forward. So one we're just going to have to watch carefully. The other one thing is also the apartment sizes, a really scary one for us. We really do see the necessity to make sure we maintain apartment development or conversions to apartments and making sure that they remain good livable spaces. And it's certainly been some of the challenges we've seen in other cities, particularly Auckland. And so that's an area that I think is an important one for us to feed back on during the next phase of consultation that the government will be undertaking. I think most importantly, in a response from the community back through the government, was this kind of ability to say, hey, one size does not fit all for medium density residential standards. So at some point, based on what the legislation says now, we'll either have to confirm remaining in the MDRS, consider removing it, or altering it. So we have that kind of choice as a council to make a decision, and there's a requirement then that there's a ratification discussion. I think it's really important to recognise that in making one of those decisions, you've got to maintain the capacity, and that's the sort of the drive from central government, and also their expectation that they'll be able to lean in and make sure councils are making decisions to ensure the sufficiency of their capacity. So either require us to do plan changes or require us to update some of our capacity requirements. So an important set of conversations, and ones that has been of great interest to many councillors. So that's probably, we need to make sure we've done our work correctly about estimating the requirements through the HBA process, putting together some information on some scenarios so that you can go into a ratification discussion, confirm, alter or remove as well informed as it can be when that requirement may occur, which is likely to be middle to late next year. So really from the work we've got going on at the moment, and really reflecting some of the priorities that we had identified through the FDS and through some of the public engagement processes that went around it, a key push for us was to say, Plan Change 9 gave us that initial step up in housing availability and capacity. The next steps was to go, actually we've still got some other issues we need to deal with through our district plan. So the priority there was to say, fundamentally part of that is to make sure that we're building houses in the right places. So updating some of our provisions in the district plan around hazards. So that's the first cab off the rank for the next plan change that we're proposing through this report. The other area, and it's been highlighted that we had a deficit in available industrial land choices, and we've correspondingly seen that through this last revaluation with a step up significantly in land values for industrial land. So the industrial land plan change is intended to provide that extra capacity and hopefully support job growth within our community as well, another critical limb. So that will start slightly behind the hazards plan change, but as some of the research is currently underway in preparation for that plan change as well. And then finally, and it'll be important to see the steer from government around these mixed zones, our business and commercial centres. It's also a chance for us to complete any inner city planning that may result in the need for plan changes. So again, that was phased to be the third plan change that we're proposing. So that's our program based on the FDS and the current sort of assessment of our requirements. Obviously we'll have an HBA that gives us some more relevant data, and in the meantime across certainly the next 12 months we'll be watching with interest and providing feedback and trying to get an understanding of the government's Going for Housing Growth agenda. So ultimately that just leads us to the proposal around the work program for the district plan team for your endorsement, please.
Thank you, JP. Very comprehensive presentation. So, councillors, any questions on this? Councillor Patterson, followed by Worship.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, JP, for the report. Page 24 on the agenda says, additional capacity requirements based on high growth projections will put pressure on council's debt and infrastructure funding plans. So our LTP currently shows that we've front-loaded the next few years with significant amount of investment in our wastewater treatment plant, its infrastructure, etc., etc. So now this has reared its ugly head. Will this impact on the other years going forward? Will that mean that our projections on the rates are likely to be incorrect?
It's a case of how you pick apart the implications and when this might occur. So we've signalled here that the government's potentially asking us to take a high growth scenario and also to enable through a plan change all of your 30-year capacity. I've talked about how we had a staged approach to unlocking areas like Nongataha. And at this stage, our 30-year infrastructure strategy does not include the infrastructure to enable that because it was intended to be 10 years out or 20 years out. If we're asked through the changes being proposed to zone early, we will have to, in our next review of the 30-year infrastructure strategy, look at the infrastructure requirements to go into Nongataha. So across that 30-year plan, it will increase the amount of infrastructure requirements, which will then have a knock-on effect to how much we need to load into subsequent LTPs, what we might have to do with development contributions going forward, and a range of other sort of things. So yes, there will be challenges to the overall picture for council debt, but at this stage, no idea what those implications might be.
Or when that would be.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. And look, I just want to acknowledge that this is really important work to provide better options at a time of increasingly unaffordable housing. But I do also have serious concern around the minimum apartment sizes change coming through from the government. We've seen what's happened down Fenton Street with our motels, and I think that this would pose a very real risk that motel units that previously were not large enough to be a dwelling size could become legally acceptable to be a dwelling size. So as part of the work stream, is there anything else that council can be doing to be protecting these areas? So currently the land use for that area is obviously tourism and commercial, not residential. So just want to ensure that areas of our community continue to be used appropriately as we solve this issue of housing.
Through you, Madam Chair, at the moment housing is enabled along Fenton Street. The prioritisation, obviously, it's a gateway zone and a tourism zone, and we have minimum apartment sizes, which does put the onus on what should be significant redevelopments of any motels that sought to convert. So, Your Worship, you are absolutely correct. There is a risk in that. At this stage, our rules protect us from the negative, and it's certainly an area we need to feed back on the government about not removing the minimum size or considering Tier 2 councils are excluded from that provision. So I think it's one of the key elements that we, when given the opportunity, need to feed back quite strongly on.
Any further questions? Councillor Lee, followed by Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, on page 18, JP, it says this information is provided as current growth assumptions have been criticised by some elected members as being unrealistic. Who would be so audacious as to criticise?
I think we've had questions from you, Councillor, on that fact. So I appreciate that. And I think it's the key here is we've got to have robust discussions on these kind of things. And I think that's the important thing about planning has got to take a long-term view. The ability for us to alter rules are years in the making, so those fluctuations are really important.
Understood. That was just an easy question. Could you please go back to the graph that had 4 different sets of lines on it, the line graph? And if we focus on the orange graph and start in 1995, we see there a very flat period of growth from 1995 through to, I think, about 2013. And from that point onwards, we see a significant jump. So I'll just point out that there are 2, depending how you look at statistics, you can put your start points and end points in different places, and that's a different place to put the start points and end points. I understand that we are going for growth. I also understand that the Western Bay of Plenty are actually experiencing real growth. So do you happen to know offhand what sort of growth levels they're hitting at the moment?
Council, Western Bays and Tauranga are Tier 1 councils, and their growth when the tiers were determined, Tier 2 councils are 6 to 10% was the category for the long run growth rate, so 6 to 10% across an extended period. High growth was above 10%. Certainly for the 7 years that we had 2013 to 2020, you've talked about a flat period and then a growth period. We were actually exceeding the medium growth limit, so I think we had 13% growth across those 7 years. So I can send you through those figures, but I think Western Bays and Tauranga are still steadily and significantly above 10%.
10% over what period?
I think it goes back to, I think it was 2003 was the benchmark. I can pull out those specifics, but there's a period where the government did the assessment using Stats New Zealand to identify the long run trend, which put councils into Tier 1, Tier 2 and Tier 3.
So we're going for growth, that's the fact. I'd like to focus on MDRS. I've got a couple of constituents who have raised a couple of issues with me, and I'd like perhaps you could offer a response to their concerns. So the issue isn't that we're going for growth, the issue is the kind of growth. So this council has adopted MDRS in the previous term without public consultation. So I guess now's an opportune time to ask the question, are we going to give the public an opportunity this time around to consult on whether we will stick with MDRS?
Shall we pick off a little of those things? Councillor, you keep saying we're a council going for growth. I think we're required to plan for growth. I don't think anyone's actively said we're going for growth. It's a requirement of the MPSUD that we plan for growth.
Oh, I thought that was a slogan that we had adopted. Government has adopted.
Yeah, I think the government's agenda is called Going for Housing Growth. So that's it morphed from Going for Growth, which was their pre-election statements and policy, to Going for Housing Growth, which is the current agenda being proposed. And consultation is a decision that you will make.
When will we make that decision?
I think one of the things we've talked about is the government's got a whole bunch of changes that propose to be landed by about mid of next year. I think that's probably the time that you would have to make a decision about what does the government's agenda look like, what proposed changes are required to be implemented, and your decisions about a way forward would probably be closer to that time.
So here's a concern that some of my constituents have about MDRS. It makes low-cost housing, or low-end housing, whatever you want to phrase that, attractive for Kāinga Ora to build here, more so than perhaps other Tier 2 cities. And we had an email that was sent, I think, to all of us elected members. I don't know who was copied in, but there's a Ngātaha resident who's concerned about the big development out there. And the developer is advertising on their website, encouraging people to come in from out of town to buy these houses. So somebody else said to me they were in a bank recently, and there were 3 people from Gisborne who were
Councillor,
opening
bank accounts. Can we get to a
accounts.
question rather than just repeating anecdotal evidence so that JP can actually
So the
provide
anecdotal
an answer?
evidence in some is that people are being attracted to move to Rotorua into these low-cost houses at a time when we're trying to restore our reputation as a tourist destination. How do you, are we attracting people from out of town to occupy these houses these low-cost houses that we're building and Kāinga Ora are building?
I don't think JP is qualified to answer that. I'm not sure if you've even seen the email, and it's a bit anecdotal, so I think we'll take a question now from Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, thank you very much for your presentation, JP, and thank you to the Chair. It was really helpful to have a whole week to actually go through what was actually quite a comprehensive report, so that was very helpful. JP, could I just ask on a slightly different tangent? The government has made announcements around granny flats, if I could call them that, or smaller dwellings on, and I just have a concern with the small number of rental properties at the moment and sky-high rents, making it very attractive to put on granny flats, etc. The portion of the government when they say that building consents won't be required. Now, forgive me, but from a previous life of my previous sins, when we used to print off reports for people looking to build, quite often we would find impediments that said, no, you can't build there, i.e. a sewer line running through. Now, if council doesn't require a building consent, or we're not notified on whatever the shape, as long as they meet their requirements, how can we influence or avoid the problems that we used to identify previously? How do you think we can submit to government to try and, great idea, but there seems to be some flaws there if council's not needed for approval?
Councillor, it's a good question, and it's some of the things we've highlighted in the council's submission. So some of you would have read or remember seeing that we circulated a draft submission to government. And Councillor, you're highlighting some of the critical issues that we see as some of the challenges that if you cut the council's records and information out of that picture, you do create some additional risks for that homeowner in developing that additional dwelling. I think one of the requirements was that they did have to get a property information memorandum, a PIM, which details some of that information as you proceed to a development. Certainly our suggestion was totally endorse the government's direction of trying to make it easier to build homes. So I think that was the first element. The second part was to go, it would be better not to cut council out, but if you wanted to try and streamline it, put in a lower fee requirement and put in a fixed date for turnaround of small consents. That would be more beneficial than simply telling someone you can just do it straight to this process without even getting a building consent. So I think there's some other mechanisms. So we had feedback on that and raised those issues that you've highlighted.
Thank you very much, JP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana. O tira tātou katoa. Kia ora, JP. Thank you for the report here, and it was quite handy to have it in good time. Just wanted to talk about I think the number was 12,400 homes, which is a bit over what we're required to do, but we're going for a bit more, just have a bit of a cushion there. Of that 12,400, what is assumed would be, i.e., I suppose, accounted for within the intensification areas, rather?
Councillor, you're testing my memory here. I think our FDS highlights that we have about 50 to 60% from infill and redevelopment within our current urban footprint, and approximately 50-ish% greenfield. So we have some existing greenfield areas, Mokahangi, Wharanui, the additional areas, which was the further block of Ngāti Whakaui tribal lands heading out towards Eastgate, plus Nongataha is approximately 5,000 more dwellings of that 12,000 number. So I think it's about 50-50.
Thank you, JP. So just to tag on to that, if at some stage, is there down the track, it's seen that the growth in that area is not quite matching up with the assumptions, is there any possibility, or would there be any potential that the government of the time may actually direct us to find more greenfield capacity?
I think that's one of the challenges immediately of this discussion around. So our intention was through the FDS to throttle supply. Make available supply. Throttle's not the wrong word. Make available supply to match the demand. So it's that over each 5 years, 10 years, as we're reviewing our HBAs and our future development strategies, we're seeing real growth numbers and we're seeing what the projections are going forward, so we can make available through plan changes additional land. The government's perception of that is actually that leads to one of the challenges we have in New Zealand, which is that a restriction of supply creates high land values and limits opportunities for the market to respond and be competitive. So the intention from what Minister Bishop has said is his desire to make sure, and I've heard the word flood, the market with potential, so that the land values stay lower and the house prices are more competitive. So it is a supply side injection that he's seeking to achieve. So our issue would be more made available earlier based on our current projections, using a high scenario. So that's the kind of the push to make sure there's plenty of opportunities for supply.
And just to add onto that too, so my last question, thank you, Madam Chair, for your indulgence. So given that scenario, the price of, or the cost, I suppose, in terms of the infrastructure required to enable this going for growth plan of the government, and given that at the recent conference we were told in no uncertain terms there will be no more, I suppose, handouts. I think his words were, the party is over, type thing. This is, of course, I'm talking about Prime Minister Christopher Luxon here, which, he did push around prudent spending, but I'm finding it a little bit contradictory that on one hand we have to plan for growth and plan for to pay for to enable the stuff, and on the other hand, sort of, well, I can't see it. This is my own view, so I just want to get your view on that. What's our position, or your position on that?
Look, I think the government has recognised that. So I've brought to you a discussion around the planning part of it. Certainly the government is also in parallel having discussions around the funding tools that need to be made available to councils to put more assets in the ground, or to borrow more, or to fund longer term more investment. So there is a parallel piece of work that is being undertaken by government, and there will be policy changes, and that may be further borrowing limits for councils or additional mechanisms to invest in some of that infrastructure. Because you're correct, if we have all of those areas going at once, if there's a choice, and I'll hypothesise, Ngāti Whakaui decides they want to start a development at the same time as we have a development proposed at Ngongataha, it will be expected from council that we're putting in those assets to support those. Now, that will require more borrowing, more investment from council. So I think the government's acutely aware of the challenges facing local government on debt and infrastructure investment, and that's a parallel piece of work they're undertaking. So I don't know the answers at this stage.
No, thank you, JP. It was a trick, well, not a trick question, but I knew it'll be a hard one for you to answer. But having the ability to borrow more is great, but it's to pay it back is quite another thing. So thank you. Kia ora.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. JP, are we assessing how many people are likely to be living in third stories? Did I hear that somewhere?
Yes, that's correct. So one of the things that we're doing within the housing and business assessment work we're currently undertaking, we're following the current guidelines and rules. We're also anticipating the potential conversations that you would like to have as an elected body about the not ratifying the MDRS or altering the MDRS. So there's all three options being considered so that we can provide you with some information about the costs and the implications of any of those decisions.
Well, thank you. When we're thinking about that, can we model the price of construction of those third stories? Because I've heard that repeatedly that they're unaffordable, so it's not a threat. MDRS is not a threat because no one can afford to build third stories. So if that's right, and we're making an assumption people live in them, then isn't there a flaw in the logic?
Councillor, and I think that becomes that reasonably expected to be realised. So there's a feasibility question that comes into those. The graphs I put up there too, and this is where the analysis that's being undertaken as part of the HBA goes from the plan enabled, so a third story is plan enabled, to economically feasible. So there is a judgment about the cost of development, and then that helps us generate, based on our house prices and our values, what's reasonably expected to be realised. So you're correct, and if you can extrapolate that, the potential of removing a third story, for example, may not have a significant impact on our capacity because of economic feasibility. So some places it will be, and other places, because of the challenges of our soils and the additional construction requirements, it's not feasible. So again, that's part of the modelling that will be undertaken as part of the HBA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just carrying on from that conversation, looking at the page 27 on the agenda, when you're giving us a sort of a timeline going forward. I know the residents of Glenholme will be glued to this because now we're talking about it in a public forum. When is the likelihood that we would be making a call on whether to go to 6 stories or higher for Glenholme with the plan? I think it says here Q3 housing analysis report to council and plan change for council approved. So Q3, is that June next year? Sort of, that's very close to the new next election. So I'm just wondering if that's going to happen in time.
Q3 is actually, so we're talking into the first quarter of next calendar year. So we'll be getting back the information on our housing and business assessment. So we're currently undertaking that work at the moment. So first quarter of next year's February, March, when you're back from the summer, is when we're starting to get some information around what the picture is. The piece there is that's the housing and business assessment. What we haven't and we may not have is where government has landed on the updating requirements of the National Policy Statement or any other RMA requirements we may have. So whilst we may have a picture of whether that 12,400 is correct, whether our growth numbers are correct, what a high growth projection may look like. We still do not know what the final outcome of the government's consultation around their Going for Growth agenda will look like. And at the moment, they're projecting that will be in that fourth quarter of this financial year, so closer to June.
Right. So just carrying on from Councillor Brown's comments about affordability, if I recall, the more you put into a space, the more affordable it becomes. And with the government wanting to change the floor sizes of apartments, this starts to get very scary for the thought of high-rise tenements, and we all know what the result of those are.
Is there a question or?
It's a concern that if we is there any way that we can do anything about that as a council in our own codes, in our own policies?
I think we have, Councillor, we've anticipated and understood what's happened in other cities where they haven't had a minimum apartment size. So that is what we carried into Plan Change 9. And I think that's the examples of where things don't provide good outcomes, and that's what we've seen from some of the Auckland developments. That's the kind of messaging we need to carry, probably with a bunch of other Tier 2 councils, into whatever discussions the government has around the potential changes. So I think it's a salient message we need to make sure we're very clear on.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, JP, this report that you've prepared is entitled District Plan Policy Programme. So this is the background work for building up to a plan change. Do I understand that correctly?
It's seeking to confirm, based on our FDS, what our next cabs off the rank as far as reviewing our district plan. Yep. So you're correct. So we've done a significant amount of housing changes, which was required. The next bit now is to come back into some of the other issues that we haven't got to, which is making sure we're really clear about some of the hazards and where people shouldn't be developing, or some of the limitations on that, and availability of land for jobs, so industrial land.
Yeah, my question really is, so this is the preliminary steps towards a, PC10 plan change, a plan change?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Now, as you'll recall, in the previous plan change, was it 2014, 2016 or thereabouts, the Springfield Golf Course somehow changed from reserve status to residential status. Would we be able to, through this process, potentially revert the zoning of the golf course to reserve?
I don't think you'd be doing that for Springfield Golf Course, but if you sought to put a reserve definition in your plan, which was removed from the 2012 district plan for all reserves, a reserve zone, you would have to do that as it'd probably be part of a combined one with another plan change, and I would suggest that would be a comprehensive residential one if we're taken in that direction by the government. I don't think it's a natural hazards plan change link. I don't think it's an industrial land plan change link. You'd probably, if you wanted to introduce a reserves zone, it may be its own plan change by itself or combined with a future housing one.
Okay. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, JP.
Thank you very much. I think, councillors, we've had quite a lot of opportunity to ask questions, so we've had a couple of quiet councillors, so I'll just check Councillor Kiriopa online if you've got any questions. No? No? Any further questions? If not, Councillor.
Just a process question, Madam Chair. As we're talking about housing and permits and industrial land and developments, etc., my minor matter was to do with those items. So do you want to address that now or at the end of the meeting?
What's the question relating to the minor matter then?
So the question is relating to an email that Councillor Kiriopa shared with us that some of you may not have been able to open because it was identified as spam, and it was about a waste energy plant that's being consented at Rainbow Mountain, and I believe it was the old Ramsay Roundwood premises just off the highway.
Okay, so I think we'll just deal with this here first because we're talking here about a policy development program. So we're talking about plan changes and sufficiency of supply in industrial land, and then how do we deal with natural hazards. So I think that's a separate discussion. So if I could just finish this discussion here first. So we've finished the questions here, so I'm happy to move that we endorse the policy development program as proposed, so that we will deal with natural hazards, industrial land and business activities. Is anyone prepared to second the policy? Thank you, Councillor Waru. And also, as part of that, we're noting that that's a government policy, it's not our policy around going for growth, may impact on any proposed changes that we may make across the next 3 years, and at this stage we know that those are unknown. So happy to open up for discussion now. I think we've had enough, we've had quite a lot of information presented to us around this. There's obviously still a lot of work to do and a lot more information to come from the government and also from JP's team in terms of all the work that needs to be done. And remembering this is only a proposed policy development program, so it's just setting a direction for a course of work. It also follows on from the FDS, where we've dealt with the housing, and there's obviously still more work to be done there, but this is just concentrating on those aspects up there. So I'm happy to support this, but if there are any further comments, I'm happy to take those now. Nope, there don't appear to be any comments. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first recommendation 2, is that the committee endorse the policy development program as proposed for natural hazards, industrial land, business activities and zones. I'd be happy to move an amendment that adds the Springfield Golf Course issue to that list.
As the mover, I'm not happy to take that amendment, and I'm not sure, ask the seconder if you're happy to. So I think we've discussed, and that is something that I know that you are particularly keen about, but we don't have the information here. We can't make any decision that affects something like that, where we've had no consultation, had no information, have had no staff report. So I'm not prepared to take an amendment on that basis. Do you wish to speak against this motion? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion now.
Yes, it leaves, that would leave a matter that's, in my view, ought to be tidied up, bearing in mind that the previous zoning was changed without consultation to the residents affected or to the golf club affected back in the day.
Point of order, Madam Chair. That's incorrect.
Would you like to explain why it's incorrect?
I think it's...
The process of a district plan of that change would have been notified. There would have been a whole consultation process, and Councillor Lee is incorrect to state that there wasn't any consultation.
Point of order. Councillor Wang just made a misrepresentation. I've lived in the area since 2010. The golf club have not been consulted. I've been told by the president of the club that they haven't been consulted. I know lots of residents that haven't been consulted. There is absolutely no doubt that this change happened without the residents in the area being notified or the golf club being notified.
I think we'll move on because we're not discussing the Springfield Golf Course decision here. We are talking about the natural hazards and industrial land. So if there are no further comments relating to this, I'm going to put that motion now. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? Thank you, Councillor. That is now carried. Thank you, councillors.
That can be recorded, please.
Thank you. We are now just going to move to page 32 of the agenda. Now this is something that was raised at the last council meeting. Councillor Wang picked up that the usual process when allocating grants is for a ratification decision of the council of the decision made by the panel that had been delegated to make the funding allocations. So the grants have been grantees have been notified. So this is, as I said, a ratification or a validation decision in relation to that. Thank you, So if there are any questions before I take a mover? Councillor? No questions, so I have had that moved. So firstly, we have had the report, so I suppose I should move that we receive the report 24 to 27 partnership agreement allocation be received. So Councillor Barker's moving the report be received, and that's seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. And secondly, I take it, Councillor Waru, that you'll move that the committee approve and endorse the partnership agreements that have been noted in the paper as to the amounts.
Correct. It's been through the process. Yes, it's pretty straightforward. Thank you,
Councillor Waru, and that was seconded by Councillor Wang. Is there any discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor Lee?
Just a question, Madam Chair. Has anybody proposed any changes to this list?
As I understand it, Councillor Lee, this was put up at the last council meeting, that these are recommendations made by the committee that was delegated to make the funding decisions.
Yes.
But it was just closing the loop in terms of the current delegations of the council that we actually had to formally adopt the recommendations.
My question was, has anybody proposed any changes to this?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. Thank you, that's all.
Councillor O'Brien?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for you, just to advise, sorry, if Councillor Lee perhaps had looked at the previous one, I believe the wrong figures had been entered into, our previous meeting on that, and I presume this is now the corrected. Sorry, I don't recall from
I think the last ones were the previous years.
Correct,
These
yes.
are this year's allocations.
And I'm just making that point.
Yep.
If there are differences, that may explain what he's
they were
comparing
presented
to.
in a PowerPoint by
Correct.
JP at the meeting
That's
with
correct.
the updated ones, but because they didn't fall into the agenda timetable, they didn't match. They didn't, fall into the written agenda, but they were presented at the meeting at the time. Okay, so no further discussion. Your Worship.
Thank you. Probably, just noting regarding the comment on whether anyone's proposed any changes, this goes through a process of a funding panel. So not all councillors were had the applications available. It goes through a specific funding panel, and they've judged it on the merits, and this was the result of that. But I do note that I know many of these organisations do incredible work for our community, so we are pleased to be able to support them to continue that, but just with the nature of the tough financial times that we currently have ourselves, and also the vast majority of funders that I'm aware of have had to reduce their funding as well. So we do note that it is tough times, but we are still finding ways to support our community organisations to do the great things that they need to.
Thank you, Your Worship. Being no further comments, I'm now going to put that motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Thank you, that is carried. Thank you. I'll just take your minor matter now. So when it's a minor matter, Councillor Patterson, it has to be something that we cannot make any decision about. Obviously, the staff have not reported about it. And also, my question to you is, has this been raised through the CE as well for his...
Madam Chair, I only got this like last night, so I've really only read it this morning. But I became very concerned because it's not so much the fact that we probably aren't involved in the consenting process, because that is an issue for Bay of Plenty Regional Council. This is a fairly major development. They've had a trial run for 6 months out at Rainbow Mountain. It is now going for a full consent with Bay of Plenty Regional Council. We are the kaitiaki, the governors of this region. Why were we not made aware that this was even happening? And the answer in the article was because of commercial sensitivity. I'm sorry, that doesn't fly with me, because this is a fairly contentious issue, or has the potential to be, as was shown in Kaipara, Te Awamutu and Waimati. It raised significant public interest, and we are the governors, and I'm only finding out because Councillor Kiriopa saw it in an article. Now, when something of this significance is happening in our area, we should be made aware, because really that is our role. We are the governors of this area. We should be protecting what is going on in our community. Okay, I'm not saying that this is it is a process issue. I would like to see the process amended so that if JP and his team receive something that they think, oh, hang on a minute, this might be a strategic decision, we should be at least made aware of it.
So I know that there is a process where we are required to make submissions, that councillors have been asked to provide input to submissions. You've just mentioned that this is a regional council matter, so it's probably not a situation where we can comment any further today. I thank you for raising the matter, and I think what the best course of action to do would be for me to take that back through, if you take that back, sorry, through the CE, and then if any further discussion or other information needs to come to the council, then it can come to a following council meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'm really keen to see is maybe some sort of policy put in that the governors of this community, whether it be us or anybody going forward, at least gets a heads up on anything of this sort of significance or potential significance. Thank you.
Sure, there are lots of matters that are on this district that we should be across, Councillor Patterson, but thanks for drawing that to our attention. Councillors, we've only got one other matter, which is to approve the confidential minutes, and if there are no amendments to those, then I'm happy that we just take the motion now to, rather than moving into confidential, just to approve those. So I'm getting some nods around the table. So page 37 of the agenda, can I ask that the confidential minutes of the Community and District Development Committee held on the 14th of August be confirmed as a true and correct record? That's moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Barker. There are no matters for correction. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Councillor Patterson, closing karakia, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I started in te reo, I'll finish in English. Restrictions are moved aside so the pathway is clear. To return to everyday activities, allied, enriched, unified and blessed.
Kia ora, Councillor Patterson. I declare the meeting closed at 11:01. Thank you. And just a reminder, councillors, we do have a workshop this afternoon starting at 1 o'clock. Because there are outside presenters for that, we will need to start at 1 o'clock. So I will see you back here then for that workshop on gambling. Thank you very much.